Wyoming Territory, early October 1878. The wind had teeth that morning. Cold and biting, it swept across the dry grasslands and rattled the loose barn boards on the McCrae homestead like a warning. Colt McCrae had been up since before dawn, his boots already caked in mud. The sky still dark when he stepped into the barn with a pitchfork in one hand. He never expected to find anyone hiding behind the hay bales, and certainly not a bride. She froze when he saw her dirt on her dress, veil torn, face pale as frost. Her hands clutched the folds of her skirts like they were all she had left in the world. For a long second, neither of them moved. Then the girl flinched back deeper into the shadows, eyes wide with fear. "Ma'am," Colt said slowly, setting the pitchfork down. "You're safe here. I ain't gonna hurt you." She didn't answer. Colt had seen fear before on the faces of men in war, in the eyes of his father the day the fire took the house, but this was different. This was something raw, something that made him step back instead of forward. "My name's Colt McCrae," he added, his voice quiet. "This is my place. You hungry?" The girl blinked, then nodded once. "Come on, then." She did not speak until she was seated at his kitchen table, wrapped in one of his old coats, spooning down warm potato soup like she hadn't eaten in days. Her hands shook. Her cheeks were pink now from the heat, but her eyes stayed guarded. "I'm Elara," she said finally, her voice soft. "Elara Gaines." Colt leaned back in his chair. "You from around here?" She shook her head. "No. I was supposed to be married yesterday. In Cheyenne." His jaw tightened. "But you ran." Elara's eyes met his. "He hit me. First time was 2 nights before the wedding. Said I'd learn my place once I was his." Her voice cracked. "I waited until the house was asleep. Took a horse. Rode until it collapsed. Walked the rest." Colt looked at her, really looked, and saw the torn edge of lace at her wrist, the dried blood on her knuckles, the way she kept glancing at the door like someone might burst through it any second. "You can stay here," he said quietly, "as long as you need. I do not want to be anyone's burden. You are not." That night, Colt gave her his bed and took the cot in the corner. He did not sleep much. Every time he closed his eyes, he thought of the bruises hidden beneath her sleeves. The next morning, Elara was already in the barn when he stepped outside. She was brushing down the mare, hands steady, face calmer. She looked over her shoulder. "I used to ride every day," she said. "Before all of this. You can ride here. Plenty of land." Colt worked beside her that day and the next. She did not talk much, but she listened, asked questions, helped mend a fence when a storm rolled through. By the end of the week, the fear in her eyes had dulled. One evening, Colt found her standing at the edge of the pasture, dust turning everything gold. "I keep hearing hoofbeats," she said quietly, "even when there are none." "It is not him," Colt said. "He does not know where you are. But he might. One day." Colt stepped closer. "If he comes here, he will regret it." She turned to him. "Why are you this kind to me?" He hesitated. "Because you needed someone. And I know what it is to be alone." Her eyes softened. "Were you married?" "No. Was going to be once. She got sick before the harvest. Died before I could ask her." Elara looked down. "I am sorry." He gave a small nod. "Been just me since. For years." She touched his arm then. Just a light brush of her fingers, but it stopped him cold. Her hand lingered for a second longer than it needed to. That night, he dreamed of her barefoot in the field, laughing. The next morning, he found himself watching her more than usual. She smiled now sometimes. Laughed once when a chicken flapped into her skirt. She cleaned up the kitchen without being asked, made bread while he hauled water. One night, she stayed out late shelling beans, and when Colt stepped onto the porch, he found her curled in a blanket, staring at the stars. "They look different out here," she said. "Brighter." She looked over at him. "You ever think about leaving?" "I did once. But this is home." She nodded. "Feels safer than anywhere I have ever been." He sat beside her. "Then stay." She turned toward him, her face lit by moonlight. You would let me? I would want you to. Her breath caught. Colt. He leaned closer, not touching her yet, but close enough to feel the heat of her skin. You do not have to be afraid anymore. Something shifted in her eyes. Trust, blooming slow but steady. I am not afraid of you, she whispered. He reached out then, brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. Her eyes fluttered shut. The next morning, she kissed his cheek before breakfast. By the end of the second week, her steps felt like they belonged on his porch. She followed him into town once, hood pulled up, hand tucked into his coat pocket like it belonged there. Folks stared, but Colt just kept his chin high. When they got back, she laughed as he helped her down from the wagon. You looked like you were ready to fight everyone. Maybe I was. She touched his face. You did not have to. I wanted to. That night, she stood in the doorway of his room, her hair loose around her shoulders. I do not want to be afraid anymore, she said. You are not, Colt said, standing. She walked to him one slow step at a time, and when he wrapped his arms around her, she did not flinch. She pressed her face into his chest and sighed. I feel like I can breathe again, she whispered. You are safe, he said, resting his chin on her head. You are home. And she was. The first frost came quiet, lacing the corn stalks with silver and stiffening the earth beneath Colt's boots. He found Elara in the garden that morning, sleeves rolled, her breath rising in soft clouds as she pulled up the last of the carrots. She didn't startle when he came near, just handed him a half-full sack and brushed soil from her hands. We'll need to cellar these, she said. Should keep through winter if they're dry. Colt nodded, watching as she wiped her fingers on her apron. I cleared a space in the root house yesterday. It's dry. A few crows called in the distance and the wind pushed her hair across her cheek. She tucked it back absently, then looked at him. Would you show me the ledgers sometime? I'd like to understand what's owed, what's needed. Colt hesitated, shifting the weight of the sack. You don't have to worry about that. I know I don't, she said. But I want to. He studied her a moment, then gave a short nod. After supper. Inside, she peeled apples while he chopped firewood. The rhythm of their days had settled into something quiet, something steady. When they sat down that evening, the light from the oil lamp caught on the curve of her cheekbone. Cole found he was looking more often than he meant to. She glanced up. Something wrong? No, he said. Just never had anyone ask about the ledgers before. Elara set down her fork. I used to help my father with accounts. He said there's strength in knowing where you stand. Colt rose and fetched the leather-bound book from the shelf near the hearth, laying it between them on the table. She ran her fingers over the cover before opening it. Her eyes scanned the lines quickly, brow furrowed in thought. You've kept this well, she said. There's still time before the interest comes due. If we sell the calves come spring, you'll cover most of it. We? She looked up. I want to make this place stronger. For both of us. He didn't answer right away, just rested his hand over hers. Her fingers curled around his. The next week brought sleet and long nights. They spent evenings near the fire, he with his knife and a block of pine, she with a mending basket. She hummed sometimes, low and tuneless, and it settled Colt's chest in ways he didn't understand. One night, a knock came at the door just after sundown. Colt's hand went to the rifle against the wall, and Elara's face went pale. He stepped outside, boots crunching on frozen dirt. It was only old Lester from the adjoining ridge, holding a broken bridle strap. Didn't mean to startle, Lester said. Just hoping you had some spare leather. Colt nodded and stepped back inside, closing the door behind him. Elara stood near the stove, her back straight, hands clenched at her sides. He's gone, Colt said. She turned, her voice tight. I know it wasn't him. But I can't stop bracing for it. He crossed the floor slowly. You don't have to explain. Her shoulders dropped then, and she leaned into him. He held her without asking. Later, she whispered, I want to feel normal again. Like I belong here. You do. She looked up at him, eyes clear. Then let me stay as your wife. Colt searched her face. You sure that's what you want? I want a life with you. Not borrowed. Not hidden. He brought her hand to his chest. Then it's yours. They married 2 days later under the cottonwoods behind the house. No guests, no preacher, just Colt, Elara, and the land that had held them both steady when everything else had fallen away. He tied a ribbon in her hair, and she wore the same dress she'd arrived in, cleaned and mended with careful stitches. Afterward, they walked the fence line together, boots brushing against the frostbitten grass. "You didn't ask for this," she said. "I didn't know I needed it," he said. "Until you." She reached for his hand. "I'll carry your name with pride." He kissed her knuckles, his voice low. "Then it's yours to keep." And as the sun dipped below the hills, she leaned her head against his shoulder, and they stood together in the hush of the evening, steady and whole. The snow came early that year, soft and deep, silencing the world beyond the fence line. Wind dragged against the corners of the house, and the roof groaned under the weight of it. Colt stood at the window just after dawn, one hand braced on the sill, watching the drifts rise along the pasture fence. Behind him, the floor creaked once. "You're up early," Elara said, her voice hushed from sleep. She moved closer, the hem of her flannel nightdress brushing the floor. "We'll need to bring in more wood before noon," Colt said. "That back stack's near buried." She reached for his arm. "We can do it together." They pulled on coats and boots, stepping into the white hush. The barn door stuck half-frozen in its track, and they wrestled it open with stiff fingers. Inside, the animals stirred a low grunt from the sow, a huff from the gelding in the last stall. Elara moved to the oat bin, scooping feed with practiced hands, while Colt split kindling by the stove corner. The work was slow, but it filled the morning. By midday, they had the hearth stacked full and the kitchen warm again. They ate in quiet, steam rising from a pot of stewed turnips and salt pork. Elara watched the snow falling outside. Her spoon paused mid-air. "Do you ever wonder what it would have been like to be born somewhere else?" Colt glanced up. "Never thought on it. I used to, as a girl. I'd imagine I was born in a city, or by the coast near boats and ocean wind." It felt like a kind of escape. "What changed?" She met his eyes. "I stopped needing to escape." Colt didn't answer, but something settled in his chest, low and sure. That evening, he found her by the loom she'd set up near the front window, threading wool she'd dyed with onion skins and bark. The rhythm of her hands was steady, her shoulders relaxed. "I've been thinking about spring," she said without looking up. "You've got space for more hens. Maybe a few geese if we build them a pen near the creek." Colt leaned against the frame of the doorway. "Reckon that'd work. I could sew goods for town too. I've got patterns near memorized. Women'll trade for wool socks come thaw." He crossed the room, crouched beside her, and rested a hand over hers. "You're already changing this place." She turned toward him. "So are you." He pressed his forehead to hers, their breath mingling in the warmth of the room. Outside, the snow kept falling. Later that week, word came by way of a rider from town. The man didn't dismount, just handed Colt a folded paper and tipped his hat. Colt read it once, then again slower. When he came inside, Elara was stirring lye soap at the stove. He held out the note. She wiped her hands and read it silently. Her mouth tightened. "He's looking for me." Colt gave a slight nod. "Sent word to the sheriff. Claims you're his by right." Elara folded the paper carefully and set it on the table. "He'll come. I won't let him take you." She looked at him then, steady and calm. "I'm not leaving, Colt. Not unless you send me." He crossed the space between them in 2 steps and wrapped his arms around her. She didn't tremble. She didn't flinch. "We'll be ready," she said. The next morning, Colt rode into town with a rifle strapped across his back and Elara's name in his mouth. He spoke with the sheriff, a man he'd known since boyhood, and made it plain she was his wife now and she'd come to no harm while he drew breath. The sheriff didn't argue. He just nodded and marked it down in his book. Back at the homestead, Elara was in the shed sorting seed potatoes for planting. Her hands were red from the cold, but her jaw was set. When Colt told her the law was on their side, she exhaled slow. "It's not the law I trust. It's you." That night, they lay side by side under the quilt she'd pieced together from old shirts and worn dresses. The wind rattled the eaves, but inside, the fire crackled low and warm. "I never thought I'd feel safe again," she said into the quiet. You are, he answered. She reached for his hand beneath the blanket. I know. The roads stayed choked with snow through February, and the creek behind the barn froze clear to its center. Even the hawks stopped flying, waiting out the deep cold. Colt kept to the outbuildings during daylight, checking traps, mending the north pen, and hauling water when the hand pump slowed to a trickle. Elara made large soap in the back room, her sleeves rolled past her elbows, the scent of ash and tallow clinging to the air. One morning, she met him at the door, a scarf wrapped around her head, cheeks flushed from the stove heat. Would you mind if I wrote to my sister? She asked, holding a folded scrap of paper. She was in Laramie last I heard. I wouldn't mention where I am, just let her know I'm well. Colt nodded once. We'll see if the post's running next time I head in. She didn't press further. Just tucked the note into her apron and turned back toward the kettle. By dusk, the wind had calmed, and Colt found her out near the chicken coop, brushing frost from the hinges of the feed door. Her breath caught when he stepped behind her, but she didn't startle. I was trying to remember the name of the bird that used to nest near the house I grew up in, she said. It was black with a red patch on the wing. Red-winged blackbird, Colt said. She smiled faintly. That's it. They'd come after the thaw. I used to think they brought the spring with them. He leaned against the fence post beside her. What was your sister like? Eleanor's 3 years older. Stronger than me, always was. She used to chase off boys with a broom handle when they'd come calling. Colt looked over at her. She know about what happened? Elara shook her head. I didn't tell her. I thought if I stayed quiet it'd pass. That if I behaved right, he'd stop. She drew a breath, slow and steady. But some men don't want a partner. They want something they can own. He didn't reach for her, just stood close enough that she could if she wanted. After a pause, she did. You don't treat me like I'm broken, she said. You aren't. That night, he found her sitting on the rug in front of the fire, her knees drawn up beneath her nightdress, a book resting closed in her lap. She looked over when he entered, her face soft in the lamplight. Did you ever think about leaving Wyoming? She asked. Before the war, I thought I might go south. Heard there was good land in the territories. He dropped into the chair beside her. Afterward, I didn't want to start over again. Just wanted something quiet. What brought you here? He hesitated, then said, My father bought this land a year before he died. Said it was the only place he ever felt peace. I stayed because I wanted to find it, too. Elara reached out and pulled her fingers through his. Have you? He looked at her hand in his, the way her thumb brushed his knuckle. I have now. The next week, the thaw began. Slow at first, just a drip from the eaves. The soft give of the ground as it loosened beneath their boots. The hens started laying again. Colt's traps came up wet but not frozen. One afternoon, they walked the edge of the pasture, checking fence lines. Elara paused by a stand of elder shrubs, kneeling beside the roots. These'll bloom come May, she said. Mama used to steep the flowers for fever. You want to plant more? She looked up at him. If you don't mind the work. He reached down and helped her to her feet. Put me to it. They returned to the house with mud on their boots and hands stained green from the stems. As Colt filled the wash basin, Elara stood beside him, sleeves pushed up, her palm resting light against his back. Colt, she said, voice low, I've been thinking about next winter, about what it might be like to raise something more than chickens. He turned toward her. What do you mean? She hesitated, then said, I'm late, by near 3 weeks now. His breath caught. You sure? No. But if it's true, I want you to know I'm not afraid. Not anymore. He cupped her face, rough fingers at her jaw. You won't face it alone. She leaned into his touch, eyes shining. I know. The light from the stove flickered across the wall. Outside, the last of the snow dripped slow from the roof. Inside, warmth settled between them like something earned. By late March, the land had begun to soften. The snow was gone from the low pastures, and the mud grew thick underfoot where the sun lingered longest. Colt's days stretched longer now, filled with repair work from the winters where a warped barn shutter, a cracked trough, the gate hinge that had rusted clean through. Elara had taken to rising before him, her steps light across the kitchen floor as she boiled wild mint and dipped cloth in vinegar to wipe down the windows. She moved with a calm purpose, her eyes tracking the light as it changed, watching the world return to color. One morning, after breakfast, she set down her mug and looked toward the door. "I want to ride out to the ridge," she said. "There's a place I remember from before the snow. A clearing. I'd like to see if the crocuses are coming up." Colt studied her face, the quiet determination behind her words. "We'll take the wagon. It's still too wet for the horses to climb that slope." She nodded. "I'll pack bread and cheese." The sun rose high by the time they reached the ridge. The trail curved through bare cottonwoods, their branches humming faint with the wind. At the top, the land opened wide, revealing a flat strip of earth tucked between the hills. Sure enough, small purple blossoms pushed through the thawed ground, their petals trembling in the breeze. Elara stepped down first, skirts brushing the grass. She knelt and touched one of the flowers gently with her fingertips. "They always came first," she said. Even when the snow hadn't fully gone, Colt didn't speak. He watched her instead as she stood and walked toward the edge where the land sloped down toward the south field. "I used to think I'd never have a place that was mine," she said. "Not really. Places belong to men, to fathers or husbands. I thought I'd have to settle into someone else's life." Colt came to stand beside her. "This life isn't just mine." She turned. "No. Now it's ours." They stayed until the sun dipped behind the western rise, casting long shadows across the hill. On the ride back, Elara rested her head against his shoulder, her breath warm through his coat. That evening, Colt brought in a worn wooden box from the barn and set it on the table. Elara raised an eyebrow. "My mother's things," he said. "I haven't opened it since I buried her." She untied the leather strap slowly. Inside were yellowed letters, a hand mirror with a cracked edge, a child's silver comb. Beneath it all, a small journal, the pages brittle with age. Elara opened it carefully, her fingers steady. "She wrote about the days," she murmured. "Sowing, planting beans, the first frost. There's a note here about you losing your front tooth." Colt smiled, "The first in days. She always made me chew slow after that." Elara looked up. "I want to write too. Not for anyone else, just to remember this. Us." He reached over and took her hand. "Then we'll keep a book of our own." As April came on, the rhythms of their days shifted with the season. Elara planted early radishes and onions while Colt turned the upper field for barley. They spoke less during the work but more during the quiet, at dusk, by lantern light, or in the stillness of their bed. One night, as she braided her hair near the fire, Colt said, "I've been thinking about the boy I used to be. How he thought strength was something loud." She looked over at him. "And now? Now I think it's the quiet things. Holding steady, waiting out the storm, loving someone even when it's hard." Elara crossed the room and knelt beside him. "You've never made it hard," she said. "Not once." He kissed her then, slow and certain, and she leaned into him like she'd always belonged there. They built a cradle together in the weeks that followed. Colt shaped the frame from pine, and Elara stitched wool batting into the lining. She sang while she worked, not songs from her childhood but new ones, half-formed and soft, meant only for the space between them. By midsummer, the barley was waist-high and the creek ran clean again. They hosted neighbors for a supper, first time since the wedding, and Elara made stewed venison and rhubarb pie. No one asked questions. No one needed to. They saw the way she watched Colt as he passed the dishes, the way he touched her elbow in passing. After the guests left, Colt latched the door and turned. "You seemed easy tonight." She nodded. "I didn't feel small. Or watched." "You were seen," he said. "Yes," she answered. "And safe." August brought heat that clung to the rafters and ripened the peaches early. Elara's belly rounded beneath her dresses, and Colt built an awning over the porch so she could sit out without the sun pressing too hard. One afternoon, she stood at the edge of the field, watching him drive the scythe through the barley. When he looked up, she waved him in. "I think it's time," she said, her voice calm. Colt didn't ask how she knew. He simply took her hand and brought her inside. The birth came before dawn, long but clean, and when the child let out his first cry, Elara wept not from pain, but something deeper. Colt sat beside her, holding their son, his hands careful around the small, wriggling weight. "We'll call him Ellis," Elara said. "After your mother's people." Colt pressed his lips to her forehead. "He'll grow up knowing this land, knowing he was wanted." That autumn, the leaves turned gold across the ridge, and the three of them walked the pasture edge each evening, the baby tucked to Elara's chest, his breath warm against her collarbone. Colt planted winter wheat with Ellis strapped to his back, and Elara laughed from the porch. She was still healing, but her eyes shone with a quiet strength he'd come to rely on. One night, as the first frost clung to the windows and the fire crackled low, Colt reached for her hand. "I didn't know a man could be this content," he said. She laced her fingers with his. "It's not contentment. It's peace." He looked at her, the firelight flickering across her cheek. "I'd follow you through every storm for what we have now." "You already did," she whispered. "And we came through it together." Outside, the wind moved through the trees like a song half-remembered. Inside, they lay close, the baby asleep between them and the house wrapped around them like a promise. They needed nothing else. They had built a life from broken things, and it held. Not because it was easy, but because they had chosen each other again and again, in silence, in labor, in love. And they always would.